All right, so good evening and welcome. My name is Lisa Connery. I'm the Director of Guidance. I appreciate your patience. I think we inadvertently sent out emails with different times, so I apologize for that. I think when we were doing those reminder emails, we confused this event with next week's college fair. So I sincerely appreciate your patience. We wanted to try to hit that sweet spot, so if people do come in more closer to 6:30, they wouldn't have missed too much of the presentation. And as Linda Hutchins was saying, if this is the worst thing that happens this year, then we're going to have a good year, right? So again, I appreciate your patience and I apologize for the inconvenience. So as we get started, before we get started, I'd like to take a minute just to introduce the counselors. You know, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to meet your student's counselor, but it's always nice to be able to put a face with a name as you're making phone calls or you're emailing them. So I'll go ahead and start over here to the left. We have Andrea Hotchkin. She's our resident computer navigator. Next to her is Pam Mackey. Next to Pam is one of our new counselors, Emily Cotter. She is replacing Jason Lassard, so we're really excited to have Emily joining us. She comes to us with having a few years experience as a school counselor, so we're happy to have her, and she's going to hit the ground running. And next to Emily is Denise Brianzi. Denise joined us midway through last year, so it's nice to have Denise on the team, and she's getting to see this side of the school year, having joined us halfway through last year. And then next to Denise is Linda Hutchins. Kate Mulcahy couldn't be here today. She has had a personal day for her daughter, but of course, if you have any questions, she's always more than happy to help you, like all of the counselors are. So now starts the admissions process. We've had different presentations where we kind of guided you through the search process, right? Beginning to look at schools and consider schools. We've talked about testing, we've talked about teacher recs, and now tonight we're going to pull all of those pieces of the puzzle together and assist you and your student in applying to your colleges. Now, we've been in the classroom. We were in the classroom all last week with students, walking them through the various parts. So I think many of your students probably have some of this work already completed, but we will walk you through it as well so you have an understanding of what needs to happen if for any reason, your student has questions and hasn't completed a part. And then we're going to go a little more in depth into the Common App, and that's probably where a lot of the questions for your student will happen. Now, the fall is kind of an exciting time, but I think it can be a little anxiety-provoking as well. Students are going to be trying to pull their applications together and write the perfect essay while testing. They also have to work, and they have sports, and there's just a lot going on. So we're going to see things all come to a head starting in November and December. My advice would be maybe try to set a time aside, and I think I gave this advice in the spring, on the weekends, to sit down and kind of regroup with your student and talk with them about where they're at in the process and maybe what their focus is going to be during that given weekend. So Saturday morning, let them sleep in a little bit, but that might be a great time to kind of sit down and say, okay, where are you at? Let's go back over, what are you hoping to kind of work on this weekend? And just help them kind of develop a plan, all right? Instead of every night when they come home, I find that students oftentimes are just consumed with conversations about college, right? You go to a family party, everybody's talking to them about college. Everyone's talking to them about their college essay, right? No matter where they go, they bump into someone at the grocery store. And then they come home after a long day of school and work and sports and stuff, and they sit down at the table, probably don't want to talk about the essay, right? So if you schedule a time on the weekends to sit down and talk with them and, come up with a plan of what they might accomplish over that weekend, I think if you do that each Saturday, by the time you get to November, December, and it's time to apply, your students should be in really, really good shape, okay? Now, some students, of course, are going to be applying early. Other students, they may be applying regular. Your student's counselor is more than happy to talk with them about whether or not they're a true early candidate for a given school, or maybe they would be better served applying regular decision to a school. All right. So they're happy to have those conversations. They're going to start meeting with students individually. They've already started some of the meetings, and they'll continue them this week and next week and throughout the fall semester, but really kind of looking at their list, figuring out how they're going to apply, if they're a good early candidate, talking about early decision, early action, right, and regular decision. So they'll be working through that, as well as talking with them about the possibility of balancing their list. We often find that students don't have a problem finding those reach schools that they really, would love to get into and would love to attend. It's oftentimes, what are those realistic and those safety schools for you, and how can we balance that list? So as parents, I think you should also be having that conversation with your student around balancing that list. You may be wrapping up visits throughout the fall. We currently have admissions counselors visiting here at Algonquin. We've sent out the information to students, right? We've walked them through it in our workshops about how they can access the information about who's visiting and when, and how they go about attending those visits. These visits are really important because it's a great opportunity to be able to ask specific admissions counselors questions. We'll also be having next week at 6, definitely at 6 next week, right? Will be our college fair. We currently, the last time I checked, we had 115 representatives who are going to be joining us, all right? It's a great opportunity to also be able to gather some final information, ask some final questions of those admissions counselors as you're figuring out your final list and where you're ultimately going to apply. In October, on October 10th, 6:30, we'll be having a financial aid night here in the auditorium, and we'll have a financial aid specialist from MIFA joining us to go over the nuts and bolts of the financial aid process, okay? It's typically a very good presentation. They offer you an opportunity to even ask individual questions. So if you're interested in joining us, that would be fabulous. Now, I think up here what we have, in addition on our timeline, we also have what our dates and deadlines are to submit forms to teachers and counselors. So while students may have a November 1st application deadline, they have an October 2nd school deadline. So all of those counselor rec forms, the teacher rec forms, the resume, that is all due to the counselor and the teacher by October 2nd, if you have a November 1st. We require a minimum of 20 school days to be able to process your students' material, especially when we're initiating the first application, because we have to write their letter of recommendation and complete the school counselor forms that go along with that. And when you're working with 45, 50 students, that's very time consuming. So we ask the students to provide us with 20 school days. And I don't need to read through all those dates. We will send out reminders with all of these deadlines. We typically try to send them out the Saturday before something's due, so your student has the weekend to be able to complete those forms. But please keep an eye on that, because if the students are missing their deadlines and submitting their materials, we don't necessarily guarantee that we will get those materials out on time, all right? Just because we're processing so many applications, especially in November and early December, all right? So keep an eye on that. I'm just going to touch base briefly on who's responsible for sending what, all right? So what is the student responsible for? And we will go over the Common App, but they're responsible for their application fees, their supplements. They are responsible for sending their test scores. So if they can self-report test scores, but if they need to submit official test scores, they have to go through the testing agencies to do that. We do not have test scores on our transcripts, and we don't send those through Naviance when we send materials, okay? They'll also submit a resume if necessary and a portfolio if it's required by their particular major and that school, okay? One important thing to note is that your students should continue to check their email. All right, so once they've submitted their application, the college will start sending them emails. Now, typically, once they submit their application, they get a rapid email that says, hey, we need your transcript. You know, so most likely the counselor is sending that by the deadline, so you could pause on that one. We will definitely be sending it, but keep an eye on those other emails because they might be requesting that your student complete some additional steps as part of the application process. So make sure you're just having them scan those emails that are coming in from the colleges that they're applying to. All right, so what is guidance going to send? We're going to do an initial transcript. We have a school profile that tells the colleges all about Algonquin, different information about our curriculum, our grading scale, all kinds of stuff like our AP score averages, SAT, ACT averages, highest, lowest GPA in the class, all kinds of stuff like that is all put into the school profile and shared with the colleges. We do secondary school reports and counselor recommendation forms, right, in addition to our letter. And then we send term 1 grades. This is another thing that students need to pay attention to. We will send out an email letting you know term 1 grades have been released in Power School. Please check your grades in Power School. Because the teachers transfer grades from Canvas to Power School. And just like, you know, our error with our start time tonight, right? Sometimes grading errors happen. So it's important that the students are checking their grades in Power School. If there's a grading error, they should immediately let their counselor know so that we can hold their grades from their colleges. If we don't hear from your student, then we're going to go ahead and send their term 1 grades to their for their early application colleges, okay? If your student hears from us, that's probably not a good thing because we're looking at that report card going, what is happening, all right? But so that's usually not a good thing if they've heard from us, but most kids do a nice job with term 1 and term 2 grades, right? Then come February, we'll send off mid-year, we call them mid-year grades. They're really term 2 grades to those regular decision schools that your student's applying to. And then ultimately in June, we're gonna go ahead and send off a final transcript to the school that your student is choosing to enroll at. So that's all the steps that we'll take as your student's counselor. Now the teachers, we walk the students through, and they'll show you tonight. We walk the students through how to add their teachers to Naviance that are going to be writing their recommendations, all right? Now the teacher is responsible for writing the letter and then completing the teacher evaluation form, and they will submit their letter directly to the school through Naviance and the Common App, okay? So the teacher will oversee all of that. One of the things that we have been saying to students is, again, everybody gets nervous. So we see that lots of times students will have a November 1st or a November 15th deadline. And it's like October 21st, and they start getting really nervous, like my teacher hasn't submitted my letter yet. My letter needs to go. And so then they start like emailing the teacher and asking the teacher if they sent the letter. Our teachers are really good about meeting their deadlines. So if students have met their deadlines, the teachers are meeting theirs, okay? So we are asking the students not to reach out to their teacher if they've already communicated with them and had a conversation about their deadline and submitted their materials. We're asking them to patiently wait. All right, and that then the teacher will go ahead and submit that. I mean, sending the emails is just generating, additional work for the teachers. So we're just asking students to please be patient, all right, in that process. So that's kind of like a little summary of who sends what's up and coming over the next few weeks for presentations. And now I'm going to hand it off to Andrea. She's going to talk a little bit about testing.
All right. I don't know, does anyone remember Becca Haberman? She was one, right, okay. when we used to go after her because it was way down here. So like, I don't have to adjust it too much. All right, so I'm Andrea. As Lisa was saying, I am like this resident navigator for the computer, which is why I'm also the one who's constantly talking about testing every time, because after I'm done, I jump on the computer while everyone else speaks. So if you were here last spring for the 2 parent presentations, you've heard me talk about SAT and ACT quite a bit. So I am going to talk about the tests again, but this time I'm not really going over it all what they are. By this time, most of our students have taken at least one of these tests. So what I am going to talk about is what happens next. Okay, so as Lisa was saying, it is the student's responsibility to make sure those test scores are sent to colleges if they want them considered. Okay, so I left this screen up here because again, you can see what guidance sends, and we do not send test scores. All right, so when students are looking at their colleges, the first thing they need to decide when it comes to test scores, are they going to send them? Okay, so I say that because some schools require tests. The majority do not require students to submit their tests as part of the admissions process. This is where college is saying whether they're test optional. If you look at page 4 of your workbook, there is information on the testing, but the very bottom of the page, there is a website, fairtest.org, and that website is going to give an extensive list of all of those colleges that do not require SAT scores or ACT scores as part of the admission process. I always say, though, to students, you should be double checking the college websites just to verify the testing policy before applying. All right, so with all of these schools being test optional, a common question we get in guidance is, well, should I even send my scores? Okay, really, the answer depends on the student and that school. Right, and this is where we can also help the students when we're working with them, is determining, does it make sense? Would it be in their best interest to submit scores? And it could be they're submitting to one college and not to another one. I would say, though, rule of thumb, if a student's scores are at the average or above, it's the most incoming class, recent class, okay? You can find this on a college's website. They're gonna show you the profile for the students who were just admitted, and you're gonna find that mid 50% range, all right? So if that student's scores is at that 50% and above, submitting those scores could potentially strengthen that application, all right? So we will work with students along with that, but that mid 50% range is a key number to look at. All right, so let's say a student is super happy with their scores and they're like, you know what, I really want them included with my application. The next step is ensuring that those schools receive the scores. All right, so Lisa had mentioned there's a couple ways that students can do that. One, they can self-report their scores on their common application. We're gonna go over that this evening. But the other thing is, if a college is asking for official test scores, they have to be sent directly from the testing agency. So that's College Board if it's the SAT, or just the ACT website if the student is submitting ACT scores. So not surprisingly, College Board and ACT charge students to send scores to colleges. All right, so there is a fee, $14 per college for sending the SAT. ACT charges $19 per school. All right, so this really adds up, especially as students are applying to more schools. This is where I strongly encourage students to do their research. Look at their colleges, because they're going to find that many colleges are allowing students to self-report their scores instead of sending their official scores right away. So what this means is the college is saying, you know what, you can just self-report your scores, which the students can do on their application, and then that's what they're going by. Now, you're saving money because you're not sending scores to those schools. If that student gets into that particular school and chooses that that's where they're going to go, then they're going to be required to send those official scores before enrolling. So like mathematically, if you think about it, let's say a student is applying to 10 colleges and all of them allow students to self-report. The student doesn't have to spend anything during the application process for test scores. In the end, they're going to just spend $14 for that one school that they're sending SATs for. Okay, so this is really a good place for students to do research. I've had students say, well, my parents really want to help me. What can they do? This could be something you guys can work with them, is organize and look at the requirements for these colleges and see, If the college self-reports, take advantage of that, okay? But again, official scores have to come directly from that testing agency. All right, so on that page 4, one of the things you're going to see is towards the bottom half, there's a timeline, okay? And that timeline is for students who are applying early or regular decision, and really what they should be following if they are sending their test scores from College Board or ACT. So for those students with those November 1st deadlines, it's good to send their scores honestly right now, okay? So if they're done taking tests, let's say they did them in the spring and maybe they did it again in August and they got their scores and they're like, you know what, I already know what I'm sending, they can just go right onto their College Board account or their ACT account and they just have to pay to have those scores sent. Now, if students are taking the October SAT, so that's coming up October 5th, College Board allows this as well as ACT, but when students register for the SAT or ACT, the organizations will give students the opportunity to send their scores to 4 colleges for free. These are called registration credits. They expire, okay? So they expire 9 days after students take the SAT. It's a similar time frame for the ACT, all right? So that's great, you don't have to spend money. I think the downside with that is students are sending their scores without seeing them first. All right, so I do know this creates a lot of unease. It would for me as well. So if students are okay with it, and maybe they're okay with paying that extra money, they really should wait, take a look at those scores as soon as they get them, and then make that decision. October 18th is when scores should be released for that October 5th. So I would say if a student's waiting, they get those scores, within those next couple days, they should make that decision and go onto their College Board account and pay that $14 for each school that they're sending them to. We had an ACT, there was one just this past weekend. So if students took that, those scores should be available between September 24th and November 8th. So they have a pretty long time frame. I would think it would be coming out earlier than the November 8th though. All right, so then you have students who are applying early, but they're taking tests a little bit later. So there's an October ACT, which is later, and then there's a November SAT. All right, so if students are taking those and they're applying early, those scores are going to be released after the college deadline. So students should be checking with those colleges and seeing will they accept scores from that. And a lot of them, they might. You know, I was just looking today, we have a lot of students applying to Clemson this year, I've noticed. They have an October 15 deadline. I'm just giving this as an example. We were on the website and they have October 15 deadline for the application, but it says scores, you can have them sent up until November 1st. Okay, so some colleges might have a little bit of leeway, but that's really important for your students to be checking that if they are sending scores for those later tests. All right, and that last timeline is really just for students applying regular decision, all right? So there's no rush. I think it would be good just to get that out of the way if the student already knows what they're doing though with that. It's just one less thing to think about when they're sending their applications starting in January. All right, so page 5, that just gives you a time of upcoming tests. There's gonna be, as I mentioned, there's upcoming SATs and ACTs. You're gonna see the registration deadlines. All right, so that wraps up testing once and for all. I'm done. I am going to go sit down and do the computer, and Emily Cotter is going to come up. We are going to get onto Naviance and really go through some of those important features that are used during this application process.
All right, so we're going to first start talking a little bit about the transcript. So the transcript is something that Lisa had just said that we are responsible as the counselor to send to the schools that your student is applying to. It is important, though, that your student does take a couple of steps in order for us to know where and when this transcript needs to be sent to these schools. So we're going to first start by talking about how to move your schools over into I'm applying list. So back in the spring, I'm sure they talked to you about and your student about creating a list of schools you were thinking about applying to. And so we're going to kind of talk about moving that list over because now we're actually doing the applying part and how that works on Naviance. So if you and your student are trying to access Naviance, you are going to go to the Algonquin Regional High School page, and you're going to go to our guidance page. Over on the left, you'll click Naviance, and that's how your student is going to log in to their student Naviance account. So once we get here, you're going to go up to the top tab where it says colleges. This is really the tab that you and your student are going to kind of live in. When you're in Naviance, mostly everything falls under that college tab. So when you click colleges, you're going to go to colleges I'm thinking about, because maybe your student still has their list over there, and now we're going to transition it over into their applications. So for instance, what we're going to do, we're just going to show an example of Northeastern, moving it over to our application list. So if I'm there, I'm going to go to just click the box on the left, and then I'm going to click Move to Application. So now once I move to application, it's going to ask me to pick my deadline. So I'm going to select Early Action. I always say be really mindful of this part, because there are some deadlines in there that are for the spring of 2025. So yeah, forgot the year for a minute. Spring of 2025. And sometimes a lot of students have already clicked that as their deadline, but your student will still be in high school in spring of 2025. So make sure they're looking for the deadlines in the fall of 2025, because that can be a little bit tricky. So once we click our deadline, we're going to click, is this going to the Common App, or is it direct to institution? So what does that mean? So some of the schools that your student is applying to will use the Common App. Majority will. But there are some schools that do not use the Common Application. What does that mean? It means that you're going to go to that school's website and apply through their website, but we need to know which way you're doing it. So for instance, we're going to say we're applying through the Common Application here. And then it's going to ask us about testing. We're going to say yes, but we do always tell students that if you say yes here and then you don't send your scores, it's okay. Don't panic. I know there's a lot of different places you have to click yes and no. It's more important to make sure your Common Application is accurate here than on this part where you're just requesting your transcript. And then we're going to add and request transcript. Then it's going to come to another screen, and then we're going to click initial. So initial transcript is your students' grades from 9th grade all the way to 11th grade, because obviously they don't have grades for 12th grade yet. And then we're going to be able to click request and finish. And now we'll be able to see that this school has moved over into schools I'm applying to. So it's super important that your student, first off, is moving their college list over into colleges I'm applying to. Now, if you're sitting here and you're like, oh no, my student moved their colleges over, they did not request a transcript, do we have to move it back? What do we do now? There is a nice button at the top that says Manage Transcripts. And so we would just go through, you would click the blue plus sign, and then College Application Transcript. And then it's your initial, and then you're gonna click this drop down, and the drop down is gonna list any school who you haven't requested your transcript from yet. And so once your student does go back to that colleges I'm applying to list, they should be able to see that their transcript is requested. And now as a school counselor, I know, okay, they requested their transcript for Northeastern, they're applying early action. I need to make sure I send that by that date. Okay. So with transcripts, we wanted to say that the first 4 are free, but then there is a $3 charge for any other transcript after the 4th school that your students can bring that payment into our administrative assistant, Miss Bridge, in the counseling office. All right, so now we're gonna kind of transition into letters of recommendation. So once your student has requested their transcript, this is the part where we were kind of talking about that they're responsible for some different letter recommendation forms that we're going to talk about. But I want to start off by how to request your teacher. So once your student has found out who's going to write their letter, they should have a face-to-face conversation. It shouldn't just be a Naviance notification popping up in that teacher's email. And they've talked to them. They're going to go on to Naviance and request their letter. This is important because this is how your student's teacher knows, okay, now this is the deadline, and they can log into their Naviance and they know when to submit your student's letter. So if your student has not chosen who is going to write their letters yet, definitely recommend them come see their counselor, because it's super important that we kind of figure that out ASAP. So we're just going to go through an example of requesting the letter of recommendation. So once again, you're going to start in that colleges tab as always, and you're going to go under apply to college into letters of recommendation. Once we're there, we're going to add a request. And then pre-populated will be the names of all of our staff members here. So your student, for example, we're going to choose Mr. Alera. So we're going to choose Mr. Alera. And then there's a difference between that general and that specific request. So as you can see on the screen, you'll see some schools require 0, some schools require 1, some schools only allow 2, but some schools also will only allow 1. So I know that kind of sounded like a Dr. Seuss book. So you just want to make sure that you're looking at how many letters the school is allowing, because it's important, because your primary person, so if I know I want Mr. Alera's letter to go to all my schools, it needs to be a general request. That letter is going to every school I apply to. If there is a school that allows 2 and I want to send another teachers, we're going to show you an example of that. I would in a minute. But for now, I'm going to click general request. Then there's this little box. Yes, your student has already talked to this teacher. But in this box, I would just have your student thank your teacher again for taking the time to write their letter. And I always think it's a really good idea to add your first deadline into this box just as a nice reminder. Then I'm going to go to submit request. So now we're going to go back up and I'm going to say, I want to add Mr. Barry as my second recommender. And so he's going to be my specific request, though, because I don't want his letters to go to the schools that only allow 1. I know the screen is showing that there is all these schools allowed 2, but you will run into some schools on your student's end that only allow 1. So you want to make sure for that one, that's the general, the second is specific. And we go over this with your student, too, in their individual meetings as well. So I know it's a lot of different language. So now we're going to go to kind of the form. So that's the first part of it, right? Your student talked to the teacher, your student requested the teacher letter, and now that, as Lisa was saying, there are forms that your student needs to submit 20 school days prior to the teacher in order for the teacher to write this letter of recommendation. All these forms that we talk about on Naviance are going to be held on the home page. So as you can see on the right, under recommendation forms, the first one is the teacher rec form. So it's going to make a copy. It's a Google document. It's going to ask a lot about, different circumstances for your students, the strengths, their academic weaknesses, maybe their favorite topics that they learned in that teacher's class. And they're going to submit that form to that teacher at least 20 school days, prior to their first deadline. The counselor recommendation is a little bit different. Your student does not have to request us on Naviance. They're only requesting teachers. We will automatically write the letter as long as we receive the forms. So for your counselor, you're going to have the guidance rec form. And then we also have an option for you as parents to also do a form. And this kind of is a parent brag sheet. I always love getting the parent brag sheets because I think a lot of times our students don't realize how amazing they are. And they forget to add a lot of great stuff that they do. I remember the other day I was reading this one student's sheet and then I read their parent brag sheet. And I was like, how did you forget half the things that you do that are amazing? And so I think it's really nice having that addition if you can. And then the last thing is a resume we require. And we do have a template for students to use because I know sometimes students are like, I have no idea how to do that. I know they talked about it during their junior year, but this template's also really helpful as well. So for the counselor recommendation, it would definitely be the counselor rec form and the resume, and then hopefully the parent brag sheet. This is also all due the same deadline as for the teacher. It's on page 9 in your packet. You'll see the deadlines of the student's college application deadline right next to the deadline we have for them at school. All right. Lastly, Naviance has a lot to it. We're going to talk about those college visits because I think these are really important, and something really amazing about Algonquin is that, especially being new here, is that we have so many schools that are coming to visit our students. And I, talking with some students today, they're like, oh, I already visited that school. And I'm like, that's awesome that you visited that school. But this person that's coming to Algonquin is most likely the admission rep that's going to be reading your application. So put a name to that essay, put a face to that application, and come and take the time while they're in your school to walk downstairs to meet them. And so I'm going to show you quickly how your student should sign up and how your student can kind of look to see who's coming. So once again, we're living in that favorite tab, colleges, but now we're going to move over into research colleges and to college visits. This is a list of all of the college visitors that are coming to our school. As you can see, some of them have already started, so you can't sign up for those. We do ask the students to sign up at least 24 hours ahead of time. How do they sign up? They click that registration button where it says register now. So we're going to do University of New Haven. Now it says, hey, your student signed up. But that's not the last step. So your student also has to go back to the home screen under all of our favorite forms, and there's a college rep pass. So they need this pass signed by the teachers, classes. Say if I'm missing math, I need my math teacher to sign, it's okay for you to miss my class and go to this college visit at least 24 hours ahead of time. So it's 2 steps. Register on Naviance, give the pass to your teacher. And that's so important too, because sometimes your teacher might say, hey, we're doing a test tomorrow, like you can't miss that, I'm sorry. But something really nice that I always advocate for students to do is where you registered now for that visit, it's going to list the college admission rep's name. So email that rep and say, hey, I'm so sorry, I would have loved to come visit you today while you're at my school, but I had a test. I'm applying to the University of New Haven, and I just wanted to introduce myself. That's going to show that you're engaging with that school. That's going to show that your student's interested in that school. They're making the effort of being here. They want to see that you're making the effort to see them, even if you've already visited the campus, because most likely at the campus you met a tour guide, which is great that you got to meet some fellow classmates there, but this is the person reading your application. So I do think that's important to make that connection. We do suggest when students come that they dress appropriately. They bring questions with them. So obviously the rep's going to talk about their school, but bring questions, and we do suggest some questions as well for the students. If the student needs to cancel, no big deal. Make sure they do hit cancel through Naviance, because the rep will get a list of who's there. So we want to make sure that's an accurate list. All right, now we're going to get into the next big website, which is a common application.
All right, so tonight I will be talking about the Common App. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Common App, it's a universal application that's accepted by over 1,000 colleges. There are still some colleges that don't accept the Common App, but in most cases your child will have several schools that accept the Common App, so we encourage the majority of them to complete it. This is what the main page looks like. Most of our students should already have an account. If they don't, they'll create an account. Otherwise, they're just going to sign in as a first-year student. So I will spend time talking about the main section of the Common App before Pam talks about some more specific college questions. In order to access the main section, you click on the middle Common App tab. And then there are 7 different sections of the Common App tab. So you can see them listed on the left-hand side. You can also see that when a section is completed, there's a green check mark, so that's a nice little way for your student to see where they're at. You're also able to check in on their progress by looking at that. So we'll spend some time tonight looking at each section, giving some suggestions of how to fill this out. We did spend one full workshop with students last week going through just the Common App. We gave them a lot of helpful information. You can find all of that on pages 12, 13, and 14 of your workbooks. So we'll look at the profile section first. This is pretty basic information about your student, name, contact information, demographics, languages spoken, and then we gave some different recommendations for students. Most importantly, that they enter their classes in the order of rigor. So if they're taking any AP classes, those should be at the top of the list, then their honors classes, and then their CP down at the bottom. Something that sometimes gets missed, and you can see it up here with our test student, is students who are in AP Sciences, they actually have 2 blocks of that class on their schedule for semester 1. They have their AP Science class, and then they have the lab. They want to be sure to enter this twice. It should be back to back. Sometimes that just gets overlooked, so we tried to remind students of that last week as well. So for each class, students will pick the subject that the class falls in, they'll type in the name of the class, they'll pick the level, and then they'll indicate whether it's a full year, first semester, or second semester class. Once they finish it, they are able to load like a nice PDF, and they can kind of match it up with PowerSchool just to make sure they didn't miss anything, especially if there's a bunch of semester classes. It's just kind of easy to overlook something. Something we reminded students as well is in regards to schedule changes in this section of the Common App. So once a student submits their Common App, they are reporting to schools that this is their planned schedule for the entire year. And so their colleges will have an expectation that down the road, they will be receiving grades for all of the classes that the student listed. If your child is considering a schedule change for a semester 2 class, they should definitely speak to their counselor before they submit their application so we can see if that change can be made. They can update their application before they submit. If we have students who come down for a schedule change as we get closer to semester 2 and they've already submitted their Common App, we will ask them to notify the colleges that they've applied to of their plan to make a change, and sometimes they do need to ask the college if it's okay to make the change. So we try to get ahead of that, encourage students to make any possible schedule changes beforehand so that they don't have to kind of make those additional communications, and we definitely don't want a final transcript having classes that are different than what the student entered here. The next section after courses is honors. So the most common things that students will put here would be anytime they made honor roll. That information is always available in PowerSchool. Inductions into any of Algonquin's honor societies, possible recognition for AP scores, and any other academic-related honors. If your student is on the fence about whether or not they should include something, they can always check in with their counselor and we can let them know. But it does have room for up to 5 different honors in this section. Community-based organizations typically doesn't apply. It's just a question about receiving help in your application. And then the last section of the education is future plans. So this is not a student declaring a major, anything like that. It's just asking how far the student plans to kind of advance their education, what degree they see themselves getting. This is not set in stone. Your student may not know, so they just put their best guess on their future plans here for Common App to see. So the next section is testing. We spent a little bit of time talking about testing tonight, so I'll just reiterate a few things related to this. But this is where students would self-report any test scores. So if your student has looked and decided that they would like to send scores to some colleges on their list, they would indicate that yes, they want to report their scores, and then they would be able to select which scores they want to send. This includes SAT scores, ACT scores, and it also includes AP scores. So students will be able to select that. They can also indicate future test dates. So if your child is signed up for the October SAT, they can indicate that they will take it. They can also indicate the AP test that they plan to take this upcoming May. As both Lisa and Andrea said, this is self-reporting scores, so most colleges will also require that official score report from wherever the testing agency was. If your student wants to go test optional to some schools, but not all, they'll be able to indicate that in the college-specific questions that we'll talk about a little bit later. And so the schools that they want to see their test scores will see what they enter here, and those that they want to be test optional at, they will not see this section. If your student is not choosing to report any scores, they just simply hit no to this section, and that kind of checks it off for them. The next section that tends to be a little time-consuming for students is activities section. So this section would encompass anything your student has done outside of kind of sitting in their day-to-day classes. So it gives a whole bunch of examples of activities at the top, but that would be clubs, sports, jobs, community service, sometimes it's home responsibilities, and things like that. It's really helpful if a student already has a resume or an activity list created. It will make their life a lot easier when they go to type everything into this section. There's room for up to 10 activities in this section, and we do recommend for students to order it in the order that's most important to them. So the activity where really they feel like they've gained the most or maybe had the most leadership, that should be the first thing that colleges see on that list. So for each activity, you can see there's a drop down where the student would pick the general category that the activity falls under. They can type in if they held any positions or leadership. They would indicate the organization name, a brief description. The description should include any honors or recognition that they received through that activity. And then we get into some pretty specific information about what grade they were in when they participated, what time of year, and then hours per week and weeks per year. We encourage students not to get too hung up on this section. There are some clubs that maybe don't have consistent weekly meetings, so they should just do their best with those sections if it's not a consistent time frame. The other thing that's really nice about this section is because we do recommend students to put them in order of most importance, sometimes things get a little lost in translation and they want to reorder after they've entered. There are some arrows to the right-hand side of each activity that allows the student to easily switch the activities between each other, so they don't feel like they have to kind of restart if they want to reorder things. We do recommend for students to only focus on activities that they have participated in during their high school years. Of course, that means if a student has started an activity before high school and continued into high school, that's fine, but we would encourage them to leave off anything that they didn't participate in starting in 9th grade. So we'll move into the writing section from here. This is where the students will input their personal essay. So we first introduced the essay back in the spring where students were given the prompts, and now is where they'll indicate which of these prompts they chose. And then down below the prompts is a text box where they'll actually paste their essay. Sometimes when students are working in a Google Doc and then they paste in Common App, the formatting doesn't always look as nice as we'd like it to. I always encourage my students to expand the text box, scan it through, make sure everything looks okay. There is a word maximum of 650. This isn't necessarily the goal, this is just the maximum. So I know some students have talked to me and they're over that and they're working on editing it down. They do want to make sure it's edited down before they put it in the text box, otherwise it will cut off anything that's after 650. So this is their primary personal essay. And then there's an additional information section. So there's 2 optional questions here that students can choose to answer. One asks about COVID. So this says, was your experience during COVID? Is there anything you want to talk about that maybe was an extenuating circumstance that impacted your education? In the workshops last week, we told students if they're going to fill out an answer to this question, it should really be something that was different from what we know happened to most students, which was online learning, hybrid learning, all of those different things that we know impacted education everywhere. We would want them to focus on something unique to their experience. They're welcome to see their counselor and kind of bounce ideas off if they're thinking, we're not sure if we should fill this in. If they don't feel like there's anything that applies to them, they should just answer no to that question. And then the last question is just kind of a general additional information. So it basically just asks if there's anything that the student was not able to input in their application that they would like to be considered. Sometimes this could be an explanation of a lengthy absence. Sometimes there are additional certifications or things like that that maybe didn't fit anywhere else on their application. Again, if students are considering entering anything here or maybe have something in mind that they don't know where it fits, please have them see us and we'll kind of guide them with where it would fit best there. And the last section I'll talk about is called courses and grades. So this isn't something that's required by all colleges, and it actually tells you right under the section heading how many of the colleges require. So for our test student, we have 1 college that requires this. So this basically requires the student to enter their full transcript, 9th through 11th grade, including the classes they took, their final grades, and the credits they earned. Some colleges require this, but some don't. Some students get lucky and they don't have to do this, while others do. So in the workshops last week, your students were given 2 transcripts. One they reviewed and they signed, they let us know if they saw any issues, and the other we asked them to keep for their records, for situations where they might have to complete anything related to this. There's different versions of this form that colleges require. There's also something called an SRAR, which is a similar idea. So if you go in, so the student would indicate that, yes, they can access their transcript. And then if we just go into 9th grade to show an example, so it would ask the student for the school they attended during that grade, the year they attended, our grading scale, and what our schedule is. So this information is also in your workbook. The students received it as well. And then you can see for each subject, they pick the subject title, they type in the course name, pick the level, and type in their grade and credit. So again, something that's tedious. Sometimes it's nice that some colleges don't require it, but some students may need to do this. If they need help getting started on this, we're happy to help with it. And then really once they start, they pretty much get the hang of it. So those sections make up the main body of the Common App. Everything inputted here gets sent to every college's students apply to. So we know it's a lot of information, but the positive about the Common App is that all of this information only gets entered once, and then your student can link all of their colleges to receive it. So I'll turn it over to Pam Mackey now, and she'll go into some of the college-specific questions.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good evening. So tonight I'm going to just walk you through the colleges section of the Common App. We're going to start with the dashboard. The Common App dashboard is the central location where you can monitor your applications, including deadlines, requirements, and progress. Once you've added colleges, they're going to be displayed here. Andrew, if you would expand on Carnegie Mellon, we're going to be picking on Carnegie Mellon tonight. You're going to be able to see what you've completed so far, what still needs to be completed, and this is a quick way to check in and see if there are any writing supplements, the dreaded extra writing supplements. Next, we're going to click on Application Requirements. That's on the top right. Yep. I personally love this little page here. It's like open up on my computer all the time, and I always go here with the students. I think it's a really user-friendly way of kind of mapping out all of the questions that you're going to have. So deadlines are going to be on here. Requirements, does it take the SAT? Does it not take the SAT? Does it take writing? All of that information's on here. You can do a quick copy-paste with this too. Make your own spreadsheet. I've been encouraging the students to get organized because, as you can already hear, this is a lot, and I want them to sort of start to kind of build spreadsheets and Google Docs and things like that. So this is great information for them as well. All right, cool. So we're going to click on the My Colleges tab, and this is where you're going to go through and answer the specific questions for each college you're applying to. The main body of the Common App that Denise just went over, that's going to go to every school, all right? And now the information here is going to go to the specific colleges. So if you go over here, we're going to click on Carnegie Mellon again. And if you go to the top, we'll start with questions, Andrea. Thank you. So these are the specific questions that the individual school is going to ask. There's a spot here where you're going to indicate the application type. So that's going to be early action, early decision, regular decision, and rolling. Carnegie Mellon offers ED, early decision, and that's the binding one for those of you that are wondering what all that lingo is. And basically, this is where students are going to indicate if they want to apply ED and where they sign the ED agreement. We do have specific information about early decision in the workbook. If your child is applying early decision, we just ask you to get in touch with us. There's actually a portion that we also have to sign. It's kind of, going into the contract that we know the student's going early decision, and that the student knows also. There also might be questions in here asking a little bit of information, sometimes about residency, and sometimes there's also additional writing on here. All right, we'll go back to college information. All right, so this section provides important information pertaining to the specific college. So at the top, you're going to see deadlines. That's going to show you early decision, regular decision. Sometimes, rolling will be on there, early action. You're also going to see program-specific deadlines on here. The application section is going to show you the application fees and the testing policy, which is whether or not the school is test optional, and the recommendation requirements and any writing requirements they might have. All right, so now we're going to go to the recommenders and FERPA section. So I just want to reiterate that some of these things that we're kind of going through right now, like inviting the teachers for recommendations, like moving everything over in Naviance, we sat with your students during workshops and walked them through it. So we walked around while they were doing it and made sure that they were able to do these things. And we are going to be sitting with your students in our one-on-one meetings and making sure that they do all of this also. We want to slow this down, because I know this is a lot of information, and make this as user-friendly as possible for you. So I just want to pause and say, if you have questions, if you're freaked out about this, if you want to get in touch with us, we've all been doing this for a while. We're very comfortable with the process. And I always tell the students, I had a meeting with a student today, and she's like, are we done? I was like, oh no. I was like, it's not one and done. You're going to be seeing me as much as you want, probably more than you want. You're going to be getting passes from me. So anything you guys need. All right, I'll keep going. So recommenders and FERPA. So this page is going to show you a couple things. So it's going to go through how many teacher recommendations each individual college requires and allows, which, as you saw, you can also see on the Naviance page. I want to mention something very important here. Since we use Naviance, you will not be assigning teacher recommendations through Common App. Okay, we're going to do that through Naviance, and we're going to link Naviance and Common App together so that they can kind of talk to each other, and so that those recommendation requests and the recommendations that the teachers upload will make their way to Common App, and that will all go to the college, okay? In the workshop, we walked the students through filling out the FERPA waiver. We talked about this a lot with them, and we also go through this with them very slowly and double check everything for them. So again, that connects Naviance to the Common App. The FERPA is the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. And essentially what it does, it protects the privacy of the student by limiting third-party access to student educational records. So students have to go through this. They need to read through the agreement. They need to agree that they read through it. And then once they check off on allowing us to send their information, then we can actually go ahead and send those transcripts. So the other piece of this is, it's going to ask the students whether or not they waive their right to view their recommendation. We always tell students to waive their right to view the recommendation. If students do not waive their right, it can kind of make it look like maybe somebody's breathing down the neck of the recommender to write things that aren't truthful. Also, some recommenders may not write for students if they see that they do not waive their right. We talked through this a lot with the students in the workshops. I think all of them waived their right to view their recommendations. And I also want to just say, students don't need to worry. If the teacher said they're going to write them a recommendation, it's going to be great. I'm going to write them an amazing recommendation. We all spend a lot of time on those letters, and we really, again, value your input with the brag sheet. Just a quick plug for that. Okay. So if you have more questions about this, there's a matching your Common App and Naviance account. That's within the workbook there. I want to say it's like around page 14, so you can walk through that with your student if you'd like. This section, are we still here? All right, this section's also where families complete the ED agreement. So your student's gone in, checked off that they want to apply early decision. This is where they actually invite you, because we need to remember that ED is financially binding, all right? And again, that's why we want to have a conversation with you about the ED process as well. All right, so now is the happy part where we go to review and submit for the Common App. Cool. All right, so in order to actually go in and be able to submit the Common App, you need to have everything filled out, so all those little green checks that we're going to be looking for when we're filling it out. So right now, you can see there's a number of things that haven't been filled out yet. Once all the required components are complete, you're going to be able to go in and start your application submission. Once you click that submit button, it's going to bring you right on over to that payment page. So you'll go in, you'll pay there, and then there's actual confetti that comes up. So make sure you're there when they press that button and have some ice cream after. All right, so one other thing I want to note, and Denise mentioned this, you can go through and see a PDF. It's going to show you a PDF, okay, of what it looks like. And that's what the colleges are going to see. So I really, want to mention, like, print that out, go through it, make sure it all looks good. One thing that I've noticed with this generation is they don't like to capitalize things. Everything's lowercase. They like fix their text messages so everything's lowercase. So make sure everything's capitalized. We want this to look good, right? And that's what I always tell them. Okay, writing supplements. So some colleges will have an additional writing prompt. CMU actually has 3 separate essays that they're going to use to get to know the applicant a little bit more. These, I call these an opportunity. All right, UMass has one also. I believe it's last year. It was, why do you want to attend UMass? You really want to think about these as, the college making the effort to get to know you a little bit more. I say to the kids, this is your time to shine. Like, pick something out about yourself, use these 100 characters or 300 words and do the best that you can to really make sure you come through the application as an individual. And just as an aside, definitely ask them to see those little essays, and I'm happy to look at them as well, and so are the other guidance counselors. We can review them. All right, if that writing supplement that I mentioned is optional, you definitely want to go ahead and encourage the students to fill that out. I always say if it's optional, that means do it. All right, so review and submit for writing is actually separate. So you think you're done, but you got to go back through and you got to double check everything. So once you've completed that writing in Carnegie Mellon, the Common App's been submitted to the college, then you can go in and you can submit the writing supplement. All right, Linda, you're up. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Linda Hutchins, and I get the great pleasure of going through financial aid with you. So I think Andrea does testing, and I get financial aid every time, it seems like, because I still have kids in college, so I'm right there with you. This section, earlier Lisa Connery had mentioned what the student is responsible for, what the counselor is responsible for, what the teacher's responsible for. We kind of like to say this is maybe the parent section. So this is what would be very helpful for you to do. I'm hoping to give you some really good information that's going to help you navigate this financial aid process. And I'd like to always start with the resources, because there is a lot of resources out there that is going to help you get through this. The first one I'm going to start with is the net price calculator, and I'm going to navigate clockwise after that. The net price calculator is required by law to be on every college website, and it's a great estimating tool. So they're going to ask you some academic questions, they're going to also ask you some financial questions, and it's going to give you an estimate of someone like your child and what they may have received in the past or given out in the past years. This is a great tool, especially if you're looking at an ED school, because they want you to do your due diligence and saying, we looked at the net price calculator, it came out roughly this amount, we were good with that. And then when the actual amount comes back and it's different, that is something that you can talk with the financial aid office about too. Okay, the next one is the college financial aid office. So just like the admission office, the college financial aid office is there to answer any of your questions. You call admissions, you can call financial aid, they are there to help you. The financial aid office is also the place where they're going to process your financial aid forms, and they're going to provide you with a financial aid package. In addition, if you have any loans, they're going to help you with processing those loans. So I just want to take a minute and say, just like the admission cycle, you also want to get organized with the financial aid cycle. They have separate deadlines. You want to make sure you meet the deadlines, and you want to make sure that every school that you're applying to, you check to make sure you meet all of their requirements. Because some of the private schools have additional forms besides just the FAFSA. Okay, and I'm going to go over that in a minute. So the next one is the CFPB. I like this website. One thing I like about it, it's called Paying for College. And what I like about this website is it's an opportunity, I spoke about this in the spring too, it's an opportunity for you to have a conversation as a family about what you're going to be able to help your child with and what they are going to need to absorb per each school that they're looking at. Some of them are $90,000 and upwards. The state schools are around 30, 35. But it's a huge difference, and you need to have that conversation now so that they can, right now, realistically have that few safety schools so they have options, and that's what we want for them. And it also gives you an opportunity to talk about, like, what is the future going to look like if you go to a certain school based on loans? And it's going to break it down so they can understand it on a monthly budget. So basically questions like, are you okay living at home a few more years after college? Do you want to go to graduate school? Do you want to be able to get out on your own? These are all conversations that you can have with your child, and it's a good website that will help you. The next one and the last one I always save is MEFA. It's the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, and it's a great resource for all Massachusetts residents. They will help you with any of your questions. So again, MEFA has lots of virtual, they have a great website, they have lots of virtual financial aid 101, as you can see. They have lots of different times. They have them at lunchtime, they have them in the early evening. They're trying to accommodate everyone. You can go in and they can give you an overview of the financial aid. The other thing I like to talk about on this slide is the three, oops, sorry, Andrew, go to this one. On this one, the CSS and the FAFSA, they have they have webinars. They are going to go through these with you in detail. And then the last thing I put up here is called the FAFSA Festival. And the name cracks me up, but it's from 4 to 6 on December 10th. You don't have to start at 4 and end at 6. You can get on it anytime you want. And they are going to pair you individually with a MEFA representative. So they could help you fill the whole thing out, or they can help you with any questions that you have. And so I thought that was pretty cool too. They are definitely coming here on October 10th, and they are going to walk us through. Last year, the FAFSA changed after 40 years, and it was a bumpy start last year, and the deadlines kept getting delayed. And so they're going to kind of walk us through the new terminology and how that is this year, that they're hoping it's going to go a lot better for you. So now we're going to look at the cost of attendance and how they calculate that. First, they're going to look at the financial aid, how financial aid is calculated, and you start with the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance is the average annual cost to attend a particular college or university, and it includes direct and indirect costs. So the direct costs are what you see on the bill. It's the tuition, room, and board. The indirect costs, you also have to pay attention to those as you're looking at all of your schools, and you're looking at the pros and cons, and costs will be one of them. And some of them will incur more costs for you than others, depending on how much you have to travel to get there, room or books and supplies, dorm room supplies, all of those can add up. So I always like to tell my story. My son went to UConn, and he brought his car his last year, and he was all excited. And we were like, yeah, it was COVID, bring your car, do what you want. And we got this bill, and it was like $1,000, and it was a parking bill. And we didn't realize we were getting it. So that was a big oops. And then I have another son who's actually a senior in college this year, and he goes about six hours away. So every time we take him there, every time we go to visit him, we get a hotel, It adds up. So just different things that you got to think about, especially that first year. Your indirect costs will add up. Just something to think about as you're looking at the pros and cons. So now we're going to look at this financial aid formula. So you take your cost of attendance and you subtract your student aid index. This used to be called your expected family contribution if anyone's filled this out in the past. They now call it the student aid index. You're going to get that student aid index from your forms that you're going to fill out and the information you put on them. And then you're going to get your financial aid eligibility. And with that financial aid eligibility, we're now going to talk about how colleges are going to help you meet their costs with this eligibility and also how the student aid index is determined. So first, there's types of financial aid. So you're going to get an award letter from the college. You get an admissions letter from the college. You're going to get a financial aid letter from the college. Financial aid letter is going to start out by talking about what they say is the cost to attend that year. And then they're going to break down how they're going to help you afford that cost. They may give you scholarships and grants. That is the gift money. That's the free money. That's what we would like to see a lot of. And that is something you don't have to pay back. So it could be a merit scholarship from a school, or it could be a federal grant. The next one is they may say, we're going to help you and you can take out these loans. So the loans are something that you would have to pay back. It would help you in the short term, but in the long term, they would have to be paid back. And again, you want to look to see if they're subsidized or if they're unsubsidized. Subsidized means that you start paying it back when you start paying back the loan, and unsubsidized means you start paying it back when you receive the loan. And then there is employment opportunities. There's work study on campus. And they might say, work study, $1,000. I just want to say, as parents, it doesn't really come off that tuition bill. Your student's going to go to school, they're going to find a job, they're going to get paid for the hours that they work every week. It's going to go directly to them. So it is a great opportunity for students, but if you're thinking it's going to come off the tuition bill, it does not. So now let's look at the financial aid forms. And this is how the student aid index is determined. First of all, the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. It's required by all schools, public and private. It used to be heavily income driven. They now say it's wealth driven because there are some asset questions on the FAFSA now after the new FAFSA last year. And based on what you do, you fill this out, and then you're going to get your SAI. It's going to be given to you on a report, and this new report is called the FAFSA Submission Summary. And again, this used to be called the Student Aid Report. And so every school is going to require it. It's usually available in October. This year, it's not going to be available until December 1st for everyone, for the public. So again, last year was a bumpy start for this new FAFSA. So the Department of Education said, hey, we're going to roll it out slowly, and we're going to try to do it right this year, and we're going to have it available for the public on December 1st. And some schools, some private schools, are going to also ask you for the CSS profile. Or some schools may even have their own forms, and that's why it's really important to be organized. The CSS profile is from College Board. College Board, you've heard through testing, that's where the SAT came from, where you would go in and register, you would go in and send them, you would also go into the College Board under your account, and you would fill out the CSS profile. So some schools are going to take the FAFSA and the CSS profile, which is more asset-driven, and they're going to give you a new student aid index. And from there, you'll have your your financial aid eligibility. Now, you're going to get these letters, and you're going to look at them. Hopefully, you'll have lots of choices, and you're going to, make your decisions. And your child might say one school really is just standing out to them over some others. But the financial aid package may not quite be the best. So it's okay if you want to call the financial aid office and have a conversation and say to them, this is my child's #1 school. Can you work with us? And they do work with you. So sometimes, I'm not going to guarantee you that, but it does work, and you have nothing to lose, everything to gain. And the other part of that too is that you're filling these forms out, and they call it prior. So if it's the 2025 fall, you're going to be filling out forms from the 2023 tax season. And if your circumstances have changed at all, you can call them up, they have forms, and you would definitely want to do that too. So the financial aid office is there to help you, and they will help you through this process, and hopefully they will work with you, especially if it's the #1 school that your child wants to go to. Sometimes they're like, are you saying they will go here if we can work with you? And you need to be ready to say yes at that point too. Okay, so just some final closing thoughts on financial aid before we slip into the NCAA. Financial aid has to be filed every year. And now, good news, we have a really robust local scholarship program with about 50 organizations. We are going to let students know about this in early winter. We kind of give you the whole fall to kind of get through the application process for colleges, and then there is an application process for the scholarships. We have a very generous community, and all students will be available to take part in that scholarship program and fill out applications. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the NCAA Eligibility Center. And again, this is only going to really pertain to probably a couple of us in this room. If your child is looking to play D1 or D2 sports, they have to register with the NCAA before it's like a serious intent. And so if they want to go D3, you do not even have to worry about this. But if they want to go D1 or 2, they need to register with the Eligibility Center. And they have a wonderful checklist right on the center. It's just like filling out the SAT to register for. You just fill out the process. It's pretty much straightforward. So there are 3 different accounts on the website. The first account is called the profile account, and that is a free account. So if you have any of your students, children, that are still looking to see if they want to play, and they are going to some recruitment camps this fall, and some of the bigger recruitment camps ask you for an NCAA ID, you can just go in for free and fill out that profile page, and you can get that NCAA ID. Now, let's say that the recruitment camp was very successful, and now someone is looking to recruit them, and they need to go to the next step, and they need to fill out the academic and amateur certification account. And so it's only for Division 1 and 2. It's like if you're going to assign a national letter of intent or you're going to go on official visit, you have to have done this ahead of time, and it's $100 for us. And so the only other thing I really want to say is the process is very straightforward. You make an account, then you have to send your transcripts. And so you go in and you request to have your transcripts sent. This is where your child needs to communicate with us, because we have to send the official transcript. It has to come from Algonquin, go straight to the NCAA. And we have to know that this is what they want us to do. We can't just mail it, we can't just email it, we have to go through the portal. So their name has to be there, we click on it, and we send the transcript. You will have to do this twice. Once when you initially sign up, and then once at the end of the year after they graduate, we'll have to send that final. And then everything else will kind of like just work through the process as you're going through to make the certification. It is pretty straightforward, but if you let us know, we can help you with this process. We do this all the time with students. And we also like to know, like, once I know someone's going D1 or D2, I put it right in my calendar for June. So I'm knowing when I'm sending their final transcript, I also have to send that too. So communication is key. I hope you got maybe a nugget out of my presentation about financial aid. MIFA truly is the authority. We're so lucky to have them. They will help you individually. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa Connery. She's going to do the closing remarks, and then we'll have question and answer. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Linda. Do you want your microphone? All right, so we shared a lot of information with you about the process. One of the things that I think is important for your student to do right out of the gate is definitely go in and start thinking about their essay. right? Start thinking about possible topics. Look at those writing supplements and see what kind of supplemental writing they have to do. A lot of the stuff that we showed you is just kind of basic. It's just, general information about you and your student, and they can do that at any given point, right? You can be tired and go and put your address and your social security number in. Where it requires a lot of creativity is the writing. So I'm encouraging my students to really look at what's required of them from their schools from a writing perspective so that they can start to draft those essays. They can set them aside and then come back to them. We did send out an email, I think, on the other day on behalf of the Algonquin Writing Center. They're going to be having a brainstorming session, I think, on October 1st that students can sign up for. So if your student is having any difficulty kind of getting started and identifying possible topics to write about, that might be a great opportunity for them to join, right? And I think they're also going to offer a follow-up workshop around editing, the college essay. We just haven't gotten that information from them yet, okay? So I think it's really important that they start to look at that and outline what's required of them so that they provide themselves with plenty of time to start that process. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to take questions now. If you have any questions, Linda and I will come with the microphone. We like to use the microphone so that everybody in the audience can hear your question, all right?
Thank you. I have a question about the College Board. You mentioned that the CSS application is done through them. Does that mean parents should have log into the College Board application as well?
No, you could do it right through your son or daughter's account for the College Board.
I have the same question. So the other thing with the Common App, which might be relevant for a few people here, is that when you go to select education for parents, the only schools available to select from are in the United States. So when we completed that, it looks like our kid is the first person in our family to get a tertiary education. And that kind of came up as an issue. Is there any other way to put in schools that are outside the US?
Okay, I don't know that answer. Does anyone know that answer?
I've not had that come up, but Andrea, maybe could you pull up the Common App while we're taking other questions? We're going to pull it up and we'll take a look at it quick and see if we can come up with an answer for you, okay? I'm going to pose the next question over here, Linda, all right? We'll come back to that Common App question.
Hi, thank you. Can you walk me through how a non-teacher letter of recommendation works its way into an application?
Sure. So when Pam was on the FERPA page, it was like there was a parent section and then there's other inviters, and you can go in there and you can put in someone's email and then they can put their application. So if it's a coach or clergy or an employer, you can put them in through there. Good question. I got a question right here. Okay.
It's on the recommendations again. If your my student's asking for 2 different recommendations from 2 different teachers, and he's waiving his right, obviously, to review them, can a guidance counselor review the 2 and determine which one's the best one, so he picks that for the general versus the specific?
So just to let you know, I would say it has to do probably more with the major that they're selecting. You do not have to worry. I am telling you right now. If your teacher has said that they will give them a good recommendation, they will get a good recommendation. And I have looked at a lot of the teachers' recs, and they are good. So I would have them, if they are looking like at a STEM field, I would have them pick their math or science teacher as their primary. Or if they're looking at more of like a humanities, I would have them pick an English or social studies. So if it's business, again, they could do math. I would have them pick a core teacher as their primary. And again, we know, like, even if they pick business, they might change their mind, but they really want an academic teacher. So whichever one of the 5 core areas, I would have them pick one of them first. And even if they asked a business teacher, I would have them be secondary. Now, there's not a lot of schools. I think we've scared you. There are not a lot of schools that are only going to let one come. So there are some, but there's a lot of them that'll let 2. Anyone? Oh,
When the students report their, self-report their SAT scores, do you have them report all the scores or just the super score?
that's a good question. I would say if they can report their scores, if they're going to do a super score, I would have them report both times they took it. So like when you go in to send it, if you're going to do a super score, the SATs are going to send both sites. And trust me, I asked this question to so many admission representatives. I'm like, if you put down that you got a 500 on math on one, and then you maybe got like a 620 and it really went up, is that going to hurt me? They don't have time to go through and figure out why you got a 500 on one. Did you have a cold that day? Did you study more for the next one? They really put down the two highest ones, super score it, and move on. And they really, truly want to look at your best application, and then they present that too. So don't worry so much about that. They're going to take the two highest ones.
All right, so Linda, are we gonna circle back around, Andrea, to the Common App question? Yeah.
Yep, so you can search by country, and then I just put United Kingdom in as an example. If you do not see the school, at the very bottom, it says, I don't see it, continue, and then you can add the information in here. Okay. You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, do you mind clicking really quick under the recommenders and FERPA tab to show our other parent right where that invite the outside recommender? Really quick, so they visually can see that. So if you scroll down past, we didn't scroll down quite that far when we were presenting this part of it, but if we scroll down, you can see that's where you can invite an other recommender. And you just click on that and put their email in there. Okay? All right, so I have a question over here, Linda.
Okay.
So you mentioned that the scores are weighted. I believe at least one school asked for unweighted scores. Is there a way to get that, or that's not possible?
Are you talking about GPA right now?
Yes.
So we only give the weighted score. And so, and that's what's on our school profile, and that's what we say we give. And trust me, like again, we contacted over 200 colleges, and we made sure that what we were doing was the best for the students. So some schools some schools will take the transcript and they will recalculate the GPA. Other schools don't, so we want to give them the best one. So we really have your child's best interest in everything that we do. And everything we do has been thought out and purposeful.
Hey, I have a question about the recommendation process. Is there a number of limited recommendations a teacher can write for any students? Like, are they capping a number or anything else like that?
We're asking students to only ask 2 teachers.
So yes, so our teachers,
Oh.
we don't necessarily tell our teachers what they have to do. So our teachers are not required to write letters of recommendations, right? Many of our teachers, especially our junior teachers, get hit with a lot of requests, right, for letters. So it is at the discretion of the teacher as to whether or not they cap the number of letters of recommendations that they will write, okay? So sometimes that does happen. I do know that, that doesn't happen without, they're not capping at like 5, they're capping at like, 30, which when you're teaching a full load of classes and writing 30 letters that are probably early action, that's a considerable amount of work. So sometimes the teachers do. Okay, great. All right, you're welcome.
Okay, I think I have another question here.
I have a question related to if the student test both SAT and ACT, should we report both, or we just pick the highest one to report? Or if in the situation these 2 scores, ACT and SAT, is a similar score, so how we should report? That's one question.
I mean, I think truthfully, I would take the highest one out of the 2. If they're very similar, one's probably going to be a little higher than the other one, I would take the higher one. It doesn't really matter. You're going to have to pay for it, so they're going to look at them and they're going to be really similar. They're going to go, okay, great, check, that's really high. So I would report 1.
Another question is related to a recommendation letter. So I saw looks like the teachers will submit recommendation letter through Naviance, correct? Or maybe and then I also see from the Common App there's like a recommendation letter. So I'm kind of confused.
So we're really lucky that we have Naviance at Algonquin, and so we do everything. We sync them together, and we send everything through Naviance. So your child does not have to ask through the Common App for teacher recs. Guidance counselor recs will also go through Naviance. But in the Common App, once we send things, you'll be able to see the teacher's rec has been sent and things like that. But you don't have to ask. So like other schools don't have Naviance, they have to ask through the Common App. But we don't. We use Naviance.
I have a Naviance question. So my student has added the colleges they want to apply to, and I don't actually know how they made choices there about which deadline they were applying for. But it's hard to make the decision at that point until it's linked with Common App and you can see more of the details. So my question is, if you've added colleges to the I want to apply to, let's say, regular decision, and on reflection, having now realized that actually this school has no supplements and I'd like to apply early action, do you have to remove it and add it back?
No, you.
Andrea, do you have Naviance open? Let's just pull it up and show you really quick. You can easily edit the colleges I'm applying to list in the same way that if you forgot to request a transcript, you can request a transcript. So just if you want to click on one of the schools, Andrea, so you see once it's under college I'm applying to and you just hit edit, you can go in there and you can change your application type and stuff, all right? So you can update any of that information in there, okay?
And again,
Thanks,
you can
Andrea.
always email the counselor too, because we can do that for you too. So we're working together here, but Naviance is very user-friendly and you can do things multiple ways.
All right, we have a question here, Linda.
And just one question here regarding you can set up for the timing for the early decision or active decision, if you will, and then later on you can do other schools that are just regular all throughout the same program as well. You shouldn't all do them all at the same time.
Correct. You can apply to one school early decision. You can apply to some other schools early action. You can apply to other schools regular.
Hi, I have a Naviance question. So for the colleges that are visiting, is there a way we can download the schedule or we have to scroll through that list?
Can you download I've never downloaded it. I usually just scan it. If we go under colleges that are visiting, college visits, Andrea? It doesn't look like there's a way to download it. I think they just need to go through and kind of, scan it. I don't see it. I've never downloaded the list.
I don't think most of the students are going to want to download. No one likes paper. I like paper, but they don't like paper.
They just scan through and register.
I have a question about early decision and early action. Is it more advantageous to apply early decision versus early action as far as like acceptance rates being higher, or does it depend on the college or university they're applying to?
So that's a good question. And again, it is. Early decision means you're saying, we want to go here. The colleges know that you want to go there. There is a better acceptance rate with the early decision. But again, it has to be the choice that your child, like if you go early decision, they are going to go to that college. And so if it's their third choice, you may not want to go early decision. There's a lot of factors that are going to play into these decisions that you make. And early action is also going to give you some information early to let you know, like, okay, we got in. But I'm not going to lie, there is an advantage to going early decision.
And I think it's important to have the conversation about finances because it is binding, So a lot of families have to take the opportunity to look at financial aid packages. And so if finances are a concern, then you probably would want to, apply early action and regular decision, you hear back early for early action, but you still get to the May 1st to be able to make that final decision about where you want to go. I think it's important too that your child really needs to be committed to that school. Like that school really should be their number one school. They shouldn't be between schools and then just applying ED with the hope of getting in. They really should be super passionate and excited and committed to a school if you're going to be applying early decision, because it is binding and you're saying if we are accepted, we will attend and will rescind all of our other applications to our other schools that we might have already submitted. So I think it's super important that your child is really, committed to a particular school, and you've had a good discussion about finances and what those look like before making a decision about early decision.
I'm in the right spot.
So what about for early action has a advantage compared with a regular action? Besides it's earlier.
So yeah, I mean, it is earlier, and it does give you the students like to know, okay, I've gotten into a couple schools. It gives them some confidence and some reassurance. And again, it kind of depends on the school. Some schools are kind of going away from early action. They're leaning more towards early decision because it's mutually beneficial to both. BC is a firm one that I always like to bring up. They're like, regular is not late, it's regular. And so some schools will take a look at some of the earlies and they'll defer them. And other schools will build their list off of the early decision and then add to it in the regular. So it is a school-by-school basis, and it's whatever's right for your child, though, too. And you just have to remember that this is a crazy admission cycle, right? There is some very competitiveness that may not even have been like this 5 years ago, and a lot of it has to do with, test scores being optional and things like that. So you have to do what's right for your child. You have to have that balanced list, and then don't just pick the school like, oh, I can get into it. They have to want to go and be excited too, and then they'll have options that whatever is right for your family.
Well, and I think it's always good to look at look at them as a candidate. Are they a strong candidate for that particular school? If so, and they're ready. Some students aren't ready. Some students are kind of, dragging their feet through the process and they're not quite ready, and that's okay. I wouldn't force it. I would just kind of gently keep reminding them and encouraging them, right? So some students aren't ready for the process, and some students are actually better off applying regular decision because maybe they're right at the cusp of potentially being accepted, and having those term 2 grades as part of their application might actually benefit them. Showing a second term of really strong senior grades and increased rigor could really benefit a student. So it really depends on the individual student as to whether or not, they would be applying early action. And the counselors are happy to, talk that through with you and your student.
Absolutely.
Just a basic question. If we have an early action decision that's October 15th, is it too late if they hadn't moved it to the colleges I'm applying to section?
Well, more importantly, have they submitted all their forms? Have they submitted their forms? If they've submitted all their forms, they can go in there and they can go ahead and move that school over, and just send a quick email to the counselor if they haven't already notified their counselor of that deadline. I'm sure they did when they sent their forms in, but just give them a heads up that the deadline, that they are applying October 15th, okay?
So if we are applying for early decision, but also are looking for financial aid from that college, so we come to know about the acceptance earlier and the financial information comes later, right? So the binding part happens when, like as soon as we get accepted, or after the financial information?
So generally, you're going to go early decision, and then they're going to give you your acceptance, and you're going to have like a week. You sign that acceptance and you turn it in. So that is a good question with some of the earlies, because the FAFSA is coming out late in December. So if the school is a private school and they require the CSS profile, they are going to estimate it, and then once they get the FAFSA, they will recalculate that. And those are good questions for the school, because finances is one option. If it doesn't really work out, you can call them. But again, they are going to want you to do your due diligence. You can't just say, we wanted to get in, but we really can't afford it. They're going to challenge you on that. They want you to do that estimator. They want you to really make sure that this is the right for your whole family and for your child.
It's on early decision again. I heard that if you do early decision, a lot of colleges don't even consider you for merit scholarships. Is that true?
So some schools take a lot of their population early decision. And so, yeah, we've heard the same thing too, but again, you're going to get to look at that financial package, and if you're a good candidate for their school, they're going to want your child too. And again, you can go ED1, and a lot of schools have ED2.
So if you apply early action, and let's say the school says declined, but then your grades go up the next couple of semesters, can you reapply regular decision? Because now you've got, a couple of semesters under your belt where your grades went up?
I would say no. I would say you're going to want, if you're waiting for your grades to go up, I would go regular. And again, you want to make sure you have reach, target, and safety schools that you're applying to. So those safety schools might be the ones you're going to go early action to. Yeah, thanks. Because they probably will have already been non-accepted by the time the grades went up. So you want to wait for the grades to go up.
And if they're on the edge, they might defer them anyways.
Right, they might.
Right?
Absolutely.
So if they're on the edge, they might defer them to the regular decision application pile anyways. Like, we're not quite ready to make a decision on you, so we're going to push you into the regular decision pile, and we want to see the rest of your grades. We've even had schools come back and ask for term 3 grades on students that they're kind of maybe on the fence on.
I know students are supposed to make a list of reach, safety, and target schools. How do they determine where they fit into that, especially if they only have GPA and they don't have a test score?
They're going to use the Naviance data that we have from the past 3 years, students that have applied before them. And, well, they're just going to look at the one. Yeah.
Yeah, they would just look at what the GPA is. So again, in the spring, we brought up, it might take a minute to come up, but in the spring, we introduced you to the scattergrams. And so that is all the admissions data for Algonquin students who have had the same opportunities as your student has had, right? On the same GPA, so it doesn't scale, it doesn't care if it's weight, don't have to worry about weighted, unweighted, all that good stuff. So using that data to kind of help establish whether a school is a reach, a realistic, or a safety school, I think is important to utilize that. So Andrea's just bringing up the scattergram there for us, and and again, we keep the data 3 years, and it updates because it gets outdated relatively quickly. But you can quickly look at this, and if you don't have test scores, you can just go ahead and look across what the GPA is. If you have test scores, you can, of course, use both, right, to determine where your student lies. And if we have test scores in Naviance, your student actually plots on the scattergram. So it's really, I think this is more effective data than trying to kind of figure out what the kind of national data is for an individual school, because the colleges are familiar with Algonquin and the curriculum. And we have had admissions counselor presentations before where they have flat out said, oh, I'll accept students with a much lower GPA from Algonquin than maybe another school. So using this data is really important and helpful in the decision-making process. Like, do you have a well-balanced list? And you had a question right here, right?
My question is regarding the EA and RD process. So let's say I applied to school with EA and I got a reject or defer, whatever. Do I have to reapply, or that process will be auto roll over to the RD?
So if you apply as early action and you're rejected, then you're rejected. There's not an opportunity to like apply through the regular decision process. If you apply early action and they're like, well, you know, we're not quite ready to make a decision on your student, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move you over to the regular decision applicant pool, right? And we'd love to see your term 2 grades. So a rejection is a rejection, right? And so you're not going to do anything else with that student moving forward. If you are rolled over into the regular decision applicant pool, the college will notify your student. They'll be expected to submit additional grades, and then they'll make their decision based on the regular applicant pool, regular decision applicant pool.
It's more like the school drive the decision.
Say that again?
The school drive the decision.
The school definitely drives the decision.
Okay, so further, one more question.
Yeah.
So according to your experience, do you recommend EA versus RD? Which option usually have higher potential to get accepted?
So I'm just going to say too, like, all the college admissions reps will give you that answer too, but ED definitely is a difference. EA or regular, depending on the school, it could be advantageous to go early action just so that you will know that you're in. I'm just going to tell everyone here too, UMass Amherst, they build their class off of the early action deadline, November 5th, and then they supplement it with the regular. So that is one school that you might want to go early action unless there's a reason why you would go regular.
Right.
And these are really good questions for the particular schools, and we can also work with your child on their particular plan too. I have a question back here.
Question about the data in Naviance relative to building your relative list. So there's the scattergrams, but then there's also when you're looking at colleges I've applied to, and you can click the compare me, and then you get a chart, and that's giving you like green check marks or red X's based on your students right that. So my question is how up to date the like SAT and ACT scores are in there, because we were being advised earlier to look at individual college websites to find that information, but I'm wondering, can you not rely on that?
No, it's the same data. The data is the data. It's just like they're just showing it, displaying it differently.
And what I like about this one too is the acceptance of how many of our students applied and how many of them got in. Yeah. And Naviance updates every summer.
Okay.
Yep.
What's a reasonable minimum number of colleges to apply for, and what is it like really over the top? And if you have somebody who's got in their head that they're really going to apply for too many colleges, what's your recommendation for helping manage that as a parent?
So for most students, we recommend 6 to 8, definitely less than 10. Now, of course, if you're applying to, say, a more competitive major, if you're applying to nursing, you might need to add additional schools, right? Just because of the competitiveness of the major. But if a student has really done their homework and they've gone and they've visited these campuses, right, and they've done their due diligence, they should be able to have a list of 10 or fewer schools, right? And after that, it just kind of feels like they're just applying to schools to apply to them, but they're not really focused on what is a good fit for me, right? So doing that due diligence around, like I said, we're going to have the college fair coming up. We've got the college visits happening. Getting back onto those campuses and wrapping up some of your campus visits will really help a student to kind of narrow that list down. But if they're applying to more than 10 schools, I think that becomes, excessive unless they have a very competitive major. that they're applying to.
I agree. And they haven't really done their homework, and they're delaying their decision.
Oh, over here. Question right there.
The schools in Naviance, is that listing schools that are only on the Common App or beyond Common App?
The schools that are in Naviance, are they only on Common App?
Does Naviance only have schools that are on Common App?
No, they have all schools on there.
Okay.
So there are, Andrea, do we have any schools on our list so we do have some schools that don't necessarily accept the Common App, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may have their own application. So Andrea just put Endicott on there, so you can see it has a blank screen, meaning that it is an institution application that you can do electronically. We still will send all of our materials electronically through eDocs directly to Endicott. So when we submit materials to the Common App schools, it actually goes into the Common App, and then the colleges do kind of like nightly downloads of information that's come in, criteria, credentials, whereas these schools, it will go directly to the individual school.
So a student that is looking to apply to a school that is not on Common App will still need to go through the same process in Naviance, but then also make sure that they're doing the additional application on top of their Common App application.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's very important that they list to us when it says, how are you sending this, that they put down direct to the institution. Come in.
This isn't a question. This is actually something that might help other parents. Each university, you can look up what's called the Common Data Set, and they share information of last year's acceptance class, so you can figure out what their early decision acceptance rate is versus their early action versus regular decision. It also gives you demographics of the last year's class that went in. It's called Common Data Set.
I was just going to say that.
Just regarding the test optional, the website, thefairestest.org, is that the only schools that are test optional?
So the fairtest.org is going to list every school, and there's a lot of schools on there. Like, most schools still are very test optional. Some schools are leaning toward tests required, but that's not really going to be for this admission cycle. Some are, but most of them are still not. Yeah, so you can find out from each of your schools on the admissions page, and you can also look at Naviance when Ms. Mackey was showing you. It'll tell you if it's required or not.
When we were, when we were on the college tours, the admissions speakers encouraged us all to apply early action because they said that's when they give out more of the scholarship money. Is that your experience as well?
Well, some of the schools do have priority deadlines, and I would definitely make those for the scholarship and the merit aid. And again, I think it depends on the school. It depends on your student. It depends on what kind of candidate you are for that school. So it's hard for me to just give a yes or no, but the schools that told you that, I definitely would go ahead and do that.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of variables in that question. Other questions? I've had a lot of good questions. Okay, so again.
I'm just going to mention something about that Common Data Set.
Yeah.
So the Common Data Set, that's a really good site. What you would do is just type in the name of a college. Like, so for instance, I just wrote Endicott. Oh, sorry. So if I just wrote like Endicott College Common Data Set, then that's going to bring you right to the Common Data Set for that college. It's really hard to find it if you just go onto a college website. So that's why I just type in the name in a web search and Common Data Set. There's a lot of different sections. It's very long. Section C, though, is where you're going to see what those admission stats are. So you're going to see where that 50% range is for the test scores. You'll actually see a percentage of how many students are actually sending their scores. So when I was on there today for just one school, it was showing of the applicants who were accepted, only 25% had sent their scores. So that is a really good source, but you do have to just type Common Data Set and then whatever college. That's the easiest way to find that.
Thanks. Okay, so again, thank you for your patience tonight with our start time. We appreciate that. Again, this is just an introduction. If you have additional questions, if you would like to, meet with your student's counselor, we are more than happy to help you and support you in any way that we can. All right? Okay, so hopefully we see you next week, 6 o'clock, for the college fair. Have a great night.